morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
This time of year, every hour I get to spend horseback is special, and I guess the shorter days make you appreciate the brief daylight hours and the cherished sound of hoofbeats on the frozen ground. I've been really blessed to get to know so many good cowboys over the years, and they come in all shapes, sizes, and accents. And the one you'll hear from today was actually born in Ireland, and he followed his cowboy dreams to North America in 1959. In his lifetime, he rode, drove, or packed over 4,000 horses, over 400 which he broke himself.
Him and I bet we were in the saddle for 22 hours because you didn't want them breaking back.
Today we'll share the wonderful memories of Fred Long, who rode across the Great Divide much too soon, October 24th, 2003. I first met him when we were both competing in a horse show back in 1969. And we recorded a long conversation in 1997, and you'll hear some of those wonderful stories today. Baxter Black looks at good places to get free advice.
So you'd sure value the vet's opinion because everybody knows they really know as much about that sort of thing as real doctor.
And the Rangeland News checks the trends.
More than likely significantly cooler than what we saw last winter, all the way from coast to coast.
You'll hear the long range outlook today. And we have a good piece of cowboy poetry from Mick Kaiser.
He was after something broken, about as broke as you can get, 'cause his lady friend had not ridden too much as of yet.
On the Irvine Saddles and Western Wear horse training file, a listener wants to know what we mean when we talk about a bridle horse. Well, that's a pretty big subject, but we'll delve into it. Got a beautiful classic song of the West and the memories of Fred Long coming right up. And I'm really enjoying Matt Robertson's new CD called Making History. He's assembled some great players on this collection, and here he is.
Give me 30,000 acres, some gentle grass cattle, some horses I know well, a cozy cow camp with a little old porch where I might set a spell. Pick a tune on my old guitar from a good cow dog named Mervis. Gonna sit out here, gonna disappear where there ain't no cell phone service, no satellite TV, no utility bills back here in the hills, 'cause there's no electricity. Gonna scrub my hide in a big stock tank, watch the grass grow when it rains. When it turns fall, gonna ship them all with high prices and record gains, high prices and record gains. Wanna hear the rhythm of my rope slap on my shafts as my pony lopes into beyond. Hear the tap and the jingle of my spurs and my tack. It's a rhythm of my favorite song. I hear it best when the sun is rising. It resonates in my bones. Out in the hills I see the lightning, hear thunder as my pony runs. Out across the great wide open, I'm chasing some old steer. If he makes it to the bush, well, he'll get wild as deer. You can track him in the tall grass, it's better if there's snow. If you hear of a place where the sun always shines, well, you know I'd love to go. You know I'd love to go. Gonna burn our brand on a ball and calf while my wife holds a rope on a little cow horse. She broke herself, it's every gentleman's hope. When I see the Alberta moon shining in her eyes, well, I fall in love all over again. You know that's no surprise. I wanna hear the rhythm of my rope slap on my shaft as my pony lopes into beyond. Hear the tap and the jingle of my spurs and my tack. It's the rhythm of my favorite song. I Hear it best when the sun is rising, it resonates in my bones. Out in the hills I see the lightning, hear thunder as my pony runs. Out across the great wide open, chasing some old steer. If he makes it to the bush, well, he'll get wild as deer. You can track him in the tall grass, it's better if there's snow. If you hear of a place where the sun always shines, well, you know I'd love to go. You know I'd love to go. I wanna go. You know I'd love to go.
Well, Fred Long lived a colorful cowboy life, and back in 1997 I had a chance to record a long visit with him.
Freddie, where did your cowboying career actually start?
Oh, if I want to go back far enough, it actually started in Ireland where I was born. And it was a cattle dealer rented a big old hillside, and he used to gather cattle out of the local stock yards out of Belfast there and put them up on the grass while he was waiting for ships to ship them over to England. And that was just on a little pony thing. I thought I was cowboying just because I was a horseback. And I sure found out when I came to Canada that there's a whole lot more miles to it and a lot more concentrated work and the different classes of cattle that you had to look after. Back then, people were still shipping long 2-year-olds.
When would that have been about?
58, 59. And they were still driving beef drives in, and that was thinning out even then. But all that's gone now. See, you don't really get anybody keeping the 2.5-year-old anymore.
No.
Well, out west, in Chesapeake country, you get fellows like Ollie Knoll, they'll still bring in 2-year-olds. But he still ranches in the old way, and he mostly ships whatever he can catch, Well, he's a little better than that, but that's kind of how it goes. And a few others. And so there's not quite the same variety there that there used to be. And it also means that the big ranches aren't splitting the camps like they used to. Because you'd have what we used to call dry camps, meaning it was all the dry stock went out to that one side of the ranch, and all the cow-calf pairs to another side. And other than replacement heifers, they don't do that anymore. So it has all changed. And we rode everywhere. If you had to go somewhere, you went a horseback and you come home a horseback. And if it was far enough, you took a pack horse and you stayed. Or a wagon. I rode a wagon from Ralph Loosemore's out of Three Hills, Alberta. And that's 37 years ago. And then the next time was a Chilco Ranch, and that was a regular camp wagon. And
was that when Tom Livingston was there?
It was, yeah. And Walter Stobie was the cowboy. There was about 8 of us, I guess, in camp. And we had about 40 horses. And we just moved the whole kit and caboodle, and backed up to a little log cabin and tarped it over from the wagon, packed everything in for the cook, and slept on the floor. And it was all bedrolls, the whole thing,
Well, there's more from this memorable conversation, and one of those songs that really fits with what we do this time of year, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. You know, even here in the 21st century, there are working cowboys who go out with a wagon for the summer months, and it's a tradition that not many of us have been able to experience, but Freddie Long certainly did.
I'd already cowboyed for Alkali Lake a couple of years, and a full year on the minor ranch in Saskatchewan. But that wagon system was what I liked, because you lived with it. You weren't trucking so much like they are today, and you stayed with the cattle. You moved the cattle when you gathered a bunch large enough to move. And the other ranchers would send some fellows over to help out, because theirs would be mixed in with Chilco's, So when you gathered them and went through the herd, you popped out everything that belonged to the neighbors on whichever side of that holding pasture they lived on, so they'd head on home, you see. Or their own people could pick them up and take them home. Yeah. And then a lot of our work was actually holding cattle out, not just rounding them up. It was you keeping them on the grass, making them use it, and backing up with them. Yeah. And all the 2-year-olds had to come out of there first, because they had to go to market. And you go back in for yearlings to put them on a side hill. And then the bulls, get all the bulls out of there. So you were just left with cows and calves by the time the snow hit. And even then you were thinning them out a bit at a time. So it's amazing how many cattle a crew can handle, because they're not handling every cow that the ranch owns all in one go. You're handling them by each class of cattle that you come by. So that was a good system. I think the horses we had were very much what we called stick shitters, kind of hairy-legged. They hadn't much breeding to them. Usually a bit on the bronky side, because they were very seldom ever broke till they were 4,
A little different than the horses you'd have had in Saskatchewan?
Better bred then, because there was a lot more quarter horse types coming up across the line, all through the prairies. And then of course that same thing happened here. The horses we have today are superior in their intelligence than those tough old ponies that we had then.
Well, there's more from this modern-day legend of the West after another one of those songs of contemporary cowboy life from Richard Martin.
Cottonwoods are turning gold all along the riverside. We're loading up our horses to gather cattle we must ride. Back up to the high range before the snow begins to blow. Gather all the cattle, last year's babies, they must go. It's the annual fall roundup, we can't take a break. I got a dozen horses, 5 good hands, and a cow dog named Jay. Send a crew to fix the pens before we bring the big herd down. The big cattle trucks come rolling in to take them into town. It's the last big chore before the winter's here and the big snows come to stay. It's time to sell the cattle and we hope for big pay. It's the annual fall roundup, we can't take a break. I got a dozen horses, 5 good hands, and a cow dog named Jay. dozen horses, 5 good hands, and a cow dog named Jake.
Now it's a pleasure to ride the horses we use today because they want to work cows, and I get a lot out of that. So I don't want to ride any other kind. You know, it's like when you've ridden a good horse, well, why get on something that isn't?
Some of those cold mornings with some of those horses with a little bit of that cold blood, if it was a good cold frosty morning and there was 6 or 7 of you guys all saddling up about the same time and climbing on, I would suspect there were a few of them that would hump up and pitch a little bit.
Oh, they did that. They did that. We rode what were called ranch association saddles back then, and you pretty well needed to have something like that. And I soon found to wear chaps all the time and spurs with a decent length of shank to them, and that way the leather chaps could help you get a grip of the saddle. And your spurs, well, you could take a hold of them too. If you tried to slick heel it, you just would miss those grabs and you'd be gone. You know, every guy in that camp flattened out at one time or another. And where it would happen is you'd think you got that horse lined out, and the cow boss would pair you off, and everybody had split up. And as soon as your partner got out of sight, then that horse would go to fighting because he was just scared to death to be on his own. And the only way I found was just whip them over and under and ride and keep them moving, not let them think in terms of their own self-preservation. You know.
Keep them going somewhere.
Just keep them headed out somewhere. And you'd always come back to the other fellows anyway, because that horse didn't want to be on his own.
Yeah.
And of course you just naturally brought all those cows with you.
Yeah, made it look real good.
Yeah. The toughest part I found here in BC was not being able to change horses. You had to end up riding that same horse all day. If we'd have had a means of being able to change horses at noon, one thing we would have got more done, and secondly, a fresh horse makes the man fresh. Yeah. You know, you're not near as wore out.
And in that conversation we had, he told me how much he enjoyed the horses that he gets to ride compared to some of the ones he had in the earlier days.
Now it's a pleasure to ride the horses we use today because they want to work cows, and I get a lot out of that. So I don't want to ride any other kind. You know. It's like when you've ridden a good horse, well, why get on something that isn't?
Some of those cold mornings with some of those horses with a little bit of that cold blood, if it was a good cold frosty morning and there was 6 or 7 of you guys all saddling up about the same time and climbing on, I would suspect there were a few of them that would hump up and pitch a little bit.
Oh, they did that. They did that. We rode what were called ranch association saddles back then. And you pretty well needed to have something like that. And I soon found to wear chaps all the time and spurs with a decent length of shank to them. And that way the leather chaps could help you get a grip of the saddle. And your spurs, well, you could take a hold of them too. If you tried to slick heel it, you just would miss those grabs and you'd be gone. You know, every guy in that camp flattened out at one time or another. And where it would happen is you'd think you got that horse lined out, and The cow boss would pair you off, and everybody had split up. And as soon as your partner got out of sight, then that horse would go to fighting because he was just scared to death to be on his own. And the only way I found was just whip them over and under and ride and keep them moving, not let them think in terms of their own self-preservation. You know.
Keep them going somewhere.
Just keep them headed out somewhere. And you'd always come back to the other fellows anyway, because that horse didn't want to be on his own.
Yeah.
And of course, you just naturally brought all those cows with you.
Yeah. Made it look real good.
Yeah. The toughest part I found here in BC was not being able to change horses. You had to end up riding that same horse all day. If we'd have had a means of being able to change horses at noon, one thing we would have got more done, and secondly, a fresh horse makes a man fresh. You know, you're not near as wore out.
Much more from Fred's colorful life story still to come. And Baxter Black has some suggestions for getting free advice when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan with a little peek at free advice. When you go to B&W Hitch Factory for a visit, you won't need a passport or a Chinese translator. Why? Because their hitches are made right here in the heart of America. Sometimes that gets lost in the whir of our global economy, but lots of American businesses have survived the recession without cheapening their products or outsourcing jobs. Instead, they chose to stay at home, share the work, and spread the benefits. Learn more about what B&W stands for by going to AmericanMadeHitch.com. There is a strange phenomenon called alternative faith advice awareness, which I just made up, but can be described as that basic rule of life that says free advice is always better than advice you have to pay for. Most people have a kind of a natural resentment against someone telling them what to do, and it hurts even more when they get in the position of having to pay someone to tell them what to do. It's not like buying groceries or garden rakes where you pay your money and walk away with something in your hand. When you buy advice, it's a little harder to figure what it's worth. Most professional advice, of course, is expensive. High up on the list of professional advisors is the honorable lawyer. With the law, the common folk seem to be playing in a game where nobody knows the rules except the lawyers, so we discuss our legal problems with those people we really trust. Like, if you had an uncle who'd spent a little time in the county jail, you'd have a natural tendency to take his advice about the intricacies of the law, him being experienced and all. Only in desperation would we ask a lawyer, and then we'd question his advice. Now, if your neighbor is pretty handy and did all the wiring in his new room in his house before the fire, you'd see if you couldn't get him to help you convert the 110 in the pump house to 220. You wouldn't call an electrical contractor? You're kidding. Well, when the cow won't get up, your pig is covered with spots, and all the hair's falling off the dog, who do you call? First, you call your wife's uncle. He used to raise a few hogs before he moved to town 15 years ago. You can check his advice against that of the feed salesman and the horseshoer. Then, of course, there's old Dick, who used to work for a vet and is pretty good at hitting veins. Well, when the chips are finally down and the vet's out to the barn doing the C-section on the old milk cow, you show him that spot on the back of your neck. The doctor in town gave you some medicine to rub on it, but Grandma says it needs a mustard poultice. Your brother-in-law has offered to lance it, and you just don't know what to do, so you'd sure value the vet's opinion because everybody knows they really know as much about that sort of thing as real doctors. There's just something that goes against our grain about paying for advice, and I'm no different. After all, the way I keep up on the latest medical developments is by subscribing to the Reader's Digest. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, brought to you by B&W Turnover Bowl.
Looking for that ideal Christmas gift or stocking stuffer? How about a weekend pass to the 21st Annual Kamloops Cowboy Festival, March 16th to 19th, 2017. A terrific lineup of entertainers including Kevin David.
Early morning finds me out along the Great Divide. I stop and watch the prairie come alive.
Jay Snyder.
Imagine you're a cowboy, and breaking colts is what you do, and you've honed your skills for years and years, and other cowboys look up to you.
The one and only Ben Crane.
Dale and me was checking cows in Saskatchewan, Sandy Hill.
And so many more. There's the BC Cowboy Hall of Fame inductions, dinner shows, evening concerts, a wonderful art and gear show, the Art of the West show and sale, workshops on everything from guitar playing to saddle making. The best place to get all the details is bcchs.com. And for tickets, call 1-888-763-2224. One of the stories we're following on the Rangeland News is the outlook for the kind of winter we might see this year and next year. That story and more after this good one from Ian Tyson.
If I could roll back the years, back when I was young and limber, loose as ashes in the wind, I had no irons in the fire, and I could ride them wild young broncos, the adrenaline came quickly, and Juanita down at Mona's was my only heart's desire. We were living for the moment, and the sunlight on my silver bits, the ringing of my jingle bobs was the music of my soul. In the alley back of Mona's, I held Juanita in the shadows, how we held on to each other and the loving that we stole. And the sighing of the pines up here near the timberline makes me wish I'd done things different, but wishing don't make it so. For the time has passed so quick, the years all run together now. Did I hold Juanita yesterday? Was it 50 years ago? If I would've quit them Broncos, she might have quit that business. That was back in the fast days, you know, before the wire. I bet I could still find her, and I bet she's still as pretty as when she's Juanita down at Mona's, and my only heart's desire. And the sighing of the pines up here near the timberline makes me wish I'd done things different, but wishing don't make it so. For the time has passed so quick, the years all run together now. Did I hold Juanita yesterday? Was it 50 years ago? And the sighing of the pines up here near the timberline makes me wish I'd done things different, but wishing don't make it so. For the time has passed so quick, the years all run together now. Did I hold Juanita yesterday? Was it 50 years ago?
The news of the Rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West.
At the top of page 1, it says this is the time of year when we kind of measure the size of the firewood pile in the haystacks and try and guess how much we'll be needing. If it's a mild winter, well, we might be okay, but we might not be. Here's Rod Bain with a weather expert.
A cooler and wetter winter is forecasted for the northern thanks in part to a strengthening La Nina system. And USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey explains what that means for farmers and ranchers in that stretch. For winter wheat and grain growers, it may mean
some chilly conditions. We have to worry about winter kill if we don't get the appropriate snowfall across parts of the northern plains.
And while a brutal winter from a temperature standpoint is not expected,
it's going to be more than likely significantly cooler than what we saw last winter, all the way from coast to coast, from the Pacific Northwest into New England.
Above normal precipitation is expected throughout the northern half of the country as well, especially the Pacific Northwest and northern Rockies, which Rippey says bodes well for building up mountain snowpack totals and subsequent runoff for water supplies going into the spring and summer. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
An online petition calling for Manitoba's government to save stranded cattle in northern Manitoba because of floodwaters has attracted more than 19,000 signatures. The petition claims water pumping by the past local water pumping committee of the RM of Kelsey has placed part of the Berscheid farm underwater and stranded 400 head of cattle. According to the petition, the cattle herd is surrounded by 4 to 8 feet of water and are out of feed, although that has not yet been verified. A provincial government spokesman said Manitoba agriculture staff have been in contact with the affected producer. The spokesperson said the province does operate a pumping system in the region, but it doesn't control how the pumps are used. Here's an interesting study. When choosing a package of ground beef from the retail case, consumers rely heavily on the color of the meat to make their decision. The most desirable color is bright cherry red. Once the meat changes to a brownish color, consumers tend to leave it, resulting in discounted meat and total losses to retail stores of over $1 billion annually. Jade Cooper and colleagues at the University of Missouri recently looked at the effect of retail display lighting on ground beef color, and they found typically retailers use fluorescent lights in their cases. However, the present study and previous research show that fluorescent lighting can increase the temperature in the cases, increasing the rate of discoloration. LED lights have a higher light intensity, but they produce less heat and are more efficient, and they tell us they last longer. Well, Canadian beef producers have welcomed the signing of a new trade deal between the European Union and Canada, but the deal is less welcome to beef producers in the European Union who fear the impacts on the market. The Canadian-EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, now to be known as CETA, was finally signed in Brussels after being delayed because of objections from one region in Belgium. And the Canadian Cattlemen's Association says it's pleased with the prospective elimination of EU import tariffs on nearly 65,000 tons of Canadian beef. With this new access, the EU has the potential to become a $600 million market for Canadian beef, up from current levels of approximately $6 to $10 million per year. However, the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association said it was disappointed. One spokesman said, given the uncertainty around Brexit, the last thing we need is more beef being imported. It's clear that the EU market does not have capacity to absorb it and will lead to further downward pressure on our prices. Well, if you have cattle to ship and you wonder how to get them there, the BC Livestock Producers Co-op has a list of cattle haulers on their website, bclivestock.ca, and you can get that information from the co-op at 250-573-3939. Goosenecks, tandems, tridem liners, body jobs, they're all there, and boy, that is a handy list. Half of consumers say they check labels to ensure they are buying meat of Canadian origin. That, of course, is in Canada. Barry Davis of Leger Marketing said his firm surveyed 1,609 meat shoppers, and 2/3 said they had very strong trust and confidence in the Canadian meat supply chain. The survey also found consumers are willing to pay a higher price for Canadian fresh meat product versus an imported alternative. That study was funded by the Alberta Livestock and Meat Agency. It can be found by Googling ALMLA Leger, Leger. Innisfail Auction Market has 2 horse sales a month, regular cattle sales every Wednesday, and pre-sort sales on Mondays. The calves for those are weighed Sundays. If you need more information, see InnisfailAuctionMarket.com or call them at 1-800-710-3166. You know, 2 of our favorite cattle industry publications are Beef Illustrated and Alberta Beef. The latest issue of Beef Illustrated has a complete listing of cattle sales at auction markets across the West, along with some very thought-provoking opinion pieces. You can subscribe at 403-259-1090 or see albertabeef.ca. And finally, we're down to the final item. Don't ever underestimate the savvy of ranch wives. This gal lost her husband a few years ago and decided to go on a trip to Europe with some friends. The flight was leaving from Vancouver, so she walked into a bank close to the airport and asked to borrow $5,000. The loans officer said, well, we'll need some security for this loan, so she hands him the keys to her brand new F-350 pickup, valued at about $85,000. They run a quick check on her and the truck, and they find out she owns it clear title. So they take it and park it in their secure underground garage, and they all have a laugh at this gal using an $85,000 pickup as collateral for a $5,000 loan. A couple of weeks later, she's back to get her truck, and she pays the $5,000 loan back along with $15.41 in interest. The bank president says, well, we appreciate your business. And while you were gone, we did some checking and found out that you have a net worth of several $1 million. Why did you need to borrow $5,000 from us? And she says, where else in Vancouver could I park my truck for 3 weeks and know it's going to be there when I come home for $15.41? And that's the Rangeland News. On the Horse Training File, presented by Irvine Saddles and Western Wear, a discussion about what the term bridle horse really means, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, folks. I'm Rick Huff, host of the Best of the West Review, broadcast weekly from Albuquerque, New Mexico. In my humble opinion, Hugh McLennan's great Spirit of the West program has set the standard for broadcast features, reporting, and entertainment in the Western field, and he's not paying me to say that. You're very lucky to have found it in Canada, the U.S., or on the World Wide Web, and here's a perfect example of what keeps folks tuned in.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
The term bridle horse is one that folks sometimes are confused about. I'll try and clear it all up for you on this week's Horse Training File. Experience the true Spirit of the West at Canada's largest Western store, Irvine Tack and Western Wear. If you need a curb strap or a 4-star gooseneck trailer, you'll find it here. A saddle for every rider. Cutters, reiners, penners, trainers, working ranch cowboys, ropers. They have over 1,200 in stock. And they have Western wear for the entire family. And how about a gift card as a Christmas stocking stuffer? Shop online at irvinesaddles.ca. Free shipping on orders of over $100. irvinesaddle.ca, 1-877-946-9494. Had some interesting questions from several riders this week wondering about what we mean when we talk about a bridle horse. Isn't it just a horse that's graduated from a snaffle to a curb bit, they asked? Well, if you ask someone like Miles Kingdon or Bruce Sandifor about it, you'd probably get a thoroughly detailed dissertation on the vaquero traditions and the long process of developing what they call a velvet-mouthed spade-bit horse ridden straight up in the bridle. And that, friends, is more than a science, it's an art. On the other hand, your average leverage bit works predominantly off pressure on the curb strap. This is supported by the fact that leverage bits typically have a low port, and they're often coupled with a chain curb strap to increase the intensity of the pressure when needed. Since it's the pulling, or in some cases yanking on the reins, that immediately engages the curb strap. The horse trained and ridden in a leverage bit is not taught to carry the bit or have any sensitivity to its shape or configuration. They most often just respond to the curb strap pressure. A rider's goal when using a leverage bit like this is to engage the curb strap as quickly as possible to achieve the expected results, that is, to stop or at least slow down. Now, the vast majority of riders use leverage bits. They're simple to understand, pull until they stop, and if that doesn't work, pull harder. And they'll require more effort and energy to operate, but less preparation, sensitivity, and knowledge to learn. On the other hand, horses trained in the vaquero style are not to be yanked on. Their mouths are respected and protected, saved at all costs. The sensitivity of the spayed bid horse is prized. That sensitivity wouldn't remain if the process of making a spayed bid horse was severe. The truly great velvet-mouthed spayed bid horses have benefited from a long series of training steps that have prepared them to carry the spade. A good bridle horse will search for that comfort zone, and in doing so correct their way of going and enjoy the ease with which they can travel and work that way. As one bridle horse expert said, it's not unlike a ballerina who walks with a book on her head. The book isn't painful, it just reminds her to maintain a posture required for the dance. There are some weekend riders who ride with their hands and not their bodies, and if you took the reins out of their hands, some of them would probably fall off. The vaquero style of riding is just body and leg cues. And of course, this is a feel that not all riders will have or be able to learn. If you're gifted to have this feel for your horse, you will be able to have a true bond and relationship with your horse like no other. Get me started on this subject, and boy, I can go on for hours, but I sure hope this helps. Something else I know helps is that daily feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration, and our horses really enjoy that. Find out more at hoffmanshorseration.com. Now here's a guy who actually rode broncs with Chris Ledoux and credits Chris as a big influence on his music career, Max Labrie.
Back in the year of 1910, things were a lot more simple then. A cowboy knew right where he belonged. Days were days and nights were nights. Black was black and white was white. A man still drew the line between right and wrong. Now we all know how times have changed. Gone are the days of the open range. You face a fence with each turn that you make. Maybe there's one of you who knows of something we could do for the cowboy's sake. The thought never once crossed his mind that there would ever come a time he'd run out of open range to ride. Dad had told him and he believed this land will give you all you need. Keep the good Lord riding with you by your side. But now the cowboy stands alone with a life he loves all but gone, feeling like he's facing his worst fears. Did the red man feel the same when forced to play the white man's game? Could this be the cowboy's trail of tears? Now we all know how times have changed. Gone are the days of the open range. You face a fence with each turn that you make. Maybe there's one of you who knows of something we could do for the cowboy's sake. Now is there any one of you who knows of something we could do for the cowboy?
And now back to memories of Fred Long. We were talking about the value of being able to ride a fresh horse for the second half of a cowboy's workday.
One thing we would have got more done, and secondly, a fresh horse makes the man fresh. You know, you're not near as wore out. Well, they did change horses at Alkali Lake when we worked there, but not every time. There's a lot of open country there, and that's where it comes in easy. You can get to them. But most places you had to ride all day, and if you were weaning calves in the fall, and we'd used to tin can the cows away from them, dragging a tin can on your rope. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know if I've ever seen this procedure.
Well, we used to get them all weaned, and of course the cows would be on the outside of the fence. So a bunch of us would just tie 5-gallon pails and so on the end of a rope and ride back and forth, just tin can them as we called it, and just try and stampede them away from their own calves, you see.
I'll be darned.
And yeah, it sounds rougher than it really was, I guess.
Well, it sounds interesting on a green colt, I'll tell you.
Oh, you'd pick a good horse for that.
Yeah.
But you'd have to hold them. I bet we were in the saddle for 22 hours. Because you didn't want them breaking back. If they broke back or broke in with the calves, you had a whole new day's work to do all over again, And so you had to just stay out there. And I don't think a lot of people understand how many miles and how many hours we used to spend doing that.
There's much more to that conversation I had with Fred, and you'll hear more of it in the coming weeks. Next, it's our classic Song of the West, the story behind the song, and a good piece of cowboy poetry when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Time for a look at another one of those old classic Western songs, and this one, like so many, was inspired by the state of Wyoming. And with that, a special howdy to our listeners at KYDT in Sundance, Wyoming. But you know what? This song was written by two songwriters who had never, ever been to Wyoming. It was written for the motion picture Palm Springs, starring Bing Crosby. Leo Robin and Ralph Ranger wrote it in 1936. And these two guys are probably best known for writing Bing Crosby's famous theme song, Thanks for the Memories. And the best version I could find is from the Sons of the Pioneers, recorded in 1960, The Hills of Old Wyoming.
Let me ride on the trail, in the hills of old Wyoming, where the coyotes wail in the gloaming, in the hills of old Wyoming, in the hills of old Wyoming, in the night let me rest, with a blue sky for my ceiling, till the wind's lullaby comes stealing from the hills where my heart's at home. From the hills where my heart's at home. Wake with the song, wake with the sun, saddle to mend, cattle to tend, plenty to be done. Let me live on the rain, where a man has room to roam in, and to dream of his love in in the hills of old Wyoming, in the hills of old Wyoming.
What many folks consider the best Sons of the Pioneers trio sound ever, with Tommy, Lloyd, and Dale. Tommy Doss, Lloyd Perriman, and Dale Warren singing the lead on that beautiful cowboy song. Now in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight, here's Mick Kazzer.
Tom Horn was considered guilty by some and innocent by just as many of the shooting of Willie Nickel. Even today the controversy continues. He was the last man to be hanged in Wyoming on November 20th, 1903. The little sorrel mare. She weren't too much to look at, this little sorrel mare, but she kind of caught his eye as she was standing there. He was after something gentle to give his lady friend when he saw this little sorrel mare standing in the pen. He was after something broken, about as broke as you can get, 'cause his lady friend had not ridden too much as of yet. She was the new school teacher that had moved here from back east, and didn't know too much about horses or how to ride the beast. So he was after something gentle, so she could learn real soon, and they could ride together on a Sunday afternoon. And that little mare just fit the bill, not quite 14 hands high. When he gave her to his lady friend, a tear came to her eye. Right off they took to each other, the lady and the mare. They'd go riding every Sunday. It was quite a love affair. Then one day there was a shooting, and they blamed her cowboy beau, and they locked him in their jail for about a year or so until they could have a trial, and then it was over all too fast. They said that he would have to hang for the bad things in his past. She knew that he was innocent, and she never gave up hope. But one day in November, they stretched him with a rope. Now he was gone. And even though they claimed that he was wild, she'd loved him. Oh yes, she'd loved him, but not long enough to have a child. She did not have a lock of his hair, nor did she carry his life inside. She just had that little sorrel mare and all those Sunday rides.
Well, thanks so much for making the ride this week. I sure hope you can join us right here next week at the same time. And thanks again to our support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan. See them at meadowsprings.com. And be sure to look for the latest issue of Canadian Cowboy Country Magazine, or subscribe online at cowboycountrymagazine.com. And for our American listeners, Cowboy Country Television is now available on RFD-TV. Look for it in the listings. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.